Give me the go ahead when we are ready to start.
Yep, we are close.
Okay. Give me the go ahead when we are ready to start.
You're good to go.
Good evening, everyone, and welcome to the February 8th meeting of the Ames Community School District Board of Directors. I will call the meeting to order and entertain a motion to approve the agenda.
I move to approve the agenda as presented.
Second.
Moved by Perez, seconded by Franzen. All those in favor say aye.
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 Opposed, nay. Okay, and Director Franzen, will you please read our purpose statement?
The Ames Community School District commits to equity and access that empowers every individual to reach their full personal and educational potential.
Thank you. Our first item on the agenda for tonight is our COVID-19 update. So I will turn things over to Superintendent Reisner and Dr. Arnold.
Thank you, Dr. Arnold, for the local conditions.
Sure. Happy to provide you on an update on where we're doing and how we're doing locally. So our first slide shows our COVID positives and quarantines in our school. Today we have 9 students positive for COVID-19 and 10 quarantining due to being identified as close contacts. On the staff side, there are 2 staff positive and 2 quarantining and, one quarantining and 1 pending a test. The graphs show the positives and quarantining since October. Continue not to see a great impact of bringing the elementary school back full-time, nor have we yet seen any impact with the change with middle or high school from last week. The next slide shows the Story County metrics. The Story County 14-day average new daily case rate is 24.6. Which is in that yellow band or current yellow band. Our case count continues to be in the yellow band, even having the ISU students back on campus for the past few weeks. I did throw the positivity on there because I had been asked the past few board meetings for what our positivity rates were. So our 14-day positivity is 6.4 and our 7-day positivity is 6.0. And you can see on the graphs, our case rate appears to be slowly trending down, as you see on the left. And now that we're through with January, you can kind of see a tiny post-holiday bump in the cases on that overall graph on the right. The next slide shows our school metrics. As of today, we're fully in the green in all areas. Our 5-day student absent rates are, as you see there, ranging between the mid 1 to nearly 2%, and our staff rate 2.24 at the high school, middle school 4.83, and elementary school at schools combined at 4.33. And then you can see the graphs below on the month and the student and staff absence rate. So those student has been in the green, and then the staff absence rate has moved into the green area over the past week or so. And next slide. The final slide here is probably what I'm most excited about, includes an update on our vaccine program. We held our first vaccine clinic last Friday. We initially thought we were only going to be able to give 50 doses. However, about midweek last week, they called and said, hey, we have 100. So we said, yes, we can do that. And ultimately, we were able to vaccinate 114 staff on Friday using the Pfizer vaccine, which represents about 17% of those who wish to be vaccinated through the school district. As a reminder, about 75% of the overall staff wish to be vaccinated through us. People may choose either not to be vaccinated, they may have a medical reason or not to receive a vaccine, or may be receiving the vaccine through another provider. So just as a reminder there. And you might be asking yourself how we vaccinated more than 100 people when we had 100 doses. We didn't give people partial doses or anything like that. What happens is in the vials, though they anticipate 5 doses being available from each vial, they can get additional doses per vial. So that additional 14 represents those additional doses that were able to be drawn from those vials. The staff that were vaccinated on Friday will be returning in 3 weeks for their second dose, and then we will hold another our second clinic this Friday. We've chosen Fridays specifically because of the ability for staff to have some time to recoup after the vaccine. While we don't anticipate anyone having any strong reactions, we do know sometimes you can feel a little fatigued or headachy, which are normal signs of the immune system doing its job. But so we did take the opportunity to have those on Fridays. I provided a table below with how our tiered vaccine groups are, the definitions, and the completion status for each group. And I'll present this so that we can kind of have a monitor of how we're doing as we move through our vaccination program. So for group 1, we've got about 89% of those staff vaccinated and 67% of group 2. The remaining staff in those groups will have the opportunity to schedule for our vaccine clinic this Friday. It was either a scheduling issue or we were full for last week. You'll notice there's a tiny number in groups 3 and 4. Some of that results from we are not going to waste a vaccine no matter what. So we did have a couple urgent phone calls that were placed at the end of our clinic on Friday to people that we knew that were AIM staff that lived locally that could come to the district office as soon as we could, so that we did not waste one single vaccine. So that's been our focus too, is making sure that we're using that valuable resource very wisely. And that ends my report. Any questions?
I don't have any questions. I just want to say thank you. That's probably the best, I feel like the best news we've had in several months, or at least it feels that way. So I'm grateful to see everybody's in the green. People are getting vaccinated. Hopefully we're turning a corner. So thank you so much.
I would echo that and just say I'm so impressed with the efficiency with which you all did this to have it be a clinic where people all came to one central location, and you had it all organized by groups. And given how chaotic the rollout has been in the country and the state, I'm just super impressed with how efficient you made this. So I appreciate that.
Thank you. Wanted to make sure to make it as easy and streamlined as possible for staff, because there is so much confusion and chaos. And so trying to present any part that's easy seems like it's beneficial.
Yeah, I echo my fellow board members. This is good news. This is really good news for us. And I think since this is COVID related, I think this would be a good time for the district, for Superintendent Reisner or Dr. Arnold, to emphasize that we still wear masks, because I wonder if people are wondering. So this would be a good time to explain to our community that we have these numbers for a reason, right? We are wearing masks and we will continue to require them at school, right?
Yes, exactly. And we're not changing anything in response to the governor's her easing up on wearing masks and congregating. We are still having the mitigation steps that we had in place prior to that. Those will continue. So masks are worn, and we social distance to the greatest extent possible.
Okay, thank you.
Yes, thank you.
Kathy, when do you anticipate all the people within groups 1, 2, and 3 will have a first dose? What's your best guess?
My best guess is within, I'd say, about the next 4 to 5 weeks. It will depend on whether or not we can ramp up the number of vaccines that are allocated to us based upon other schools completing their vaccination program. So maybe on the outside 6 weeks, depending on people's ability to schedule. Some of that might put people into scheduling over spring break. So there may be impacts on people's availability for their second dose. So that is a possibility of a question, but that would be, the goal would be to have our vaccine clinics completely wrapped up by mid-April at the latest. I would hope to get it done sooner, but that's just based upon the current rate of allocation that we're receiving.
So just to clarify, I had asked first dose for groups 1, 2, and 3? Is that still the 4 to 5 weeks?
Yep, because there's with the 300 people in group 3, that's going to take us at least another 3, if not 4 weeks, just to get those through those.
Okay.
Do you anticipate getting about 100 doses a week then to give for vaccination?
I do. What we do know will happen is at week 3, so our 3rd week, or it'll actually be the 4th week of our vaccination clinic, or 3 weeks from Friday, we anticipate having double the amount, because we will then need to be doing the 2nd doses of all the people who received it at our first clinic. So at that point, we will be receiving 200 doses a week, but 100 of those will be earmarked as the 2nd doses for the first group that got their vaccine.
Thank you for putting all of this together and for organizing it and getting everybody in as quickly as you can. I really appreciate it.
All right. So at the last board meeting, I think it was the last board meeting, we talked a little bit about looking at the metrics in comparison with the state metrics. The reason for that is because with the option of hybrid being taken off the table, unless you can do all 3 models, we really, that option isn't one that we could fall into, and our metrics currently have that listed. So we thought it would be a good idea just to at least have a conversation around it, and just decide kind of where we want to go with that. So Dr. Arnold put together a comparison, and I'll turn it over to you to kind of walk us through it.
Sure. One of the things in putting together the comparison is just to see where our metrics fell versus the state metrics, knowing that with the changes, if we were in a situation that we would want to go or need to go to 100% remote, we would be required to comply with or meet the state metrics. It's been fairly clear. I've been kind of watching what has and hasn't been approved from the state side for people who've wished to change models. So I put this together. I did collapse. You'll notice our hybrid model does have an orange and a yellow model. So we have more models. I collapsed them together just for clarity of comparison. And since the state does not have specific hybrid guidance. So if you compare on the left side, our metrics versus the state metrics, and just the differences that there are, to try to be as clear with our community as we can by having at this point, since we won't have that ability, we were using really that case count to decide where are we going to move, what's the recommendation to move to hybrid or to remote. And without having those differences, it may make sense for us to make a change, either to retire our metrics and follow the states, or just change what we have as part of that.
Well, my personal feeling is I'm not in favor of changing our metrics, because they are based on CDC recommendations and the best, scientific expertise. I totally get that we have to follow the state metrics. So in my opinion, I wouldn't want to vote on approving the state metrics. I think, we know we have to follow the state metrics. So we just put that out there. This is what we have to follow. This is what we're going to follow. That's just my 2 cents.
The only thing, one thing I would suggest then is if and depending on where the direction of this is, we may want to go back to including positivity rate, maybe just as a tracking mechanism and as in a communication on our dashboard, because just so that we can be clear with that.
Yeah, I totally agree. I think it would make sense to report, we could still report the case rate, but if we have to follow the state metrics, then we need to be reporting positivity so that the community understands, if we're creeping towards a level that would indicate a change based on the state's metrics, we need to be reporting those numbers. So yeah, I agree completely.
And then my only other question might be, if we want to stay with case rate, would there be a consideration with not having hybrid, do we need to make any modifications to that? Because again, for clarity, if we're recommending we're in the yellow band or the orange band, I just, and the guidance then says this, that we should then be hybrid. I'm a little confused on how to do the dashboard or
So I guess
indicate.
I think what I'm saying, and then I'll let somebody else be able to weigh in. I think I'm leaning on the side of when you said retire our metrics. I don't like the way that sounds. But to be frank, our metrics they're not useful anymore because we can't follow them. We have guidance from the state that says we cannot use these metrics. So I think we just need to put out there what we can follow, which is the state metrics, and then report the numbers that make sense for that. But I'll let other people weigh in now.
So looking at the data, one thing, the state changed how they're calculating these. And they changed it to individuals, which I can't believe I'm pointing this out, but in the beginning of December, for example, the state's metric, we would have been at 18.5%, 19%, 19%, 17%, 18%. But based on our metrics of case counts, we'd be in the orange and we'd still be potentially hybrid, potentially something where we're in school. So I think I might be with Sabrina here of having something of our metrics remain, simply because with the university town, I think these percentages that the state is tracking are not always going to be in line with even, there might be situations where we're above the state number, but we actually might still say we want to be in school because the case count might be reasonable. I don't know. The other thing I'd say is I'm hopeful that later this week or next week, the CDC or the federal government will come out with some new guidelines. I've been talking about that. And they might have some guidance that might be significantly better than ours based on science, have some information. So I think if we're going to change to something that we show in addition to the state stuff, maybe it'll actually be that. But I do get, Kathy, that you probably want to simplify something down so that it's more like we have a community indicator color or something that's kind of telling the community where we think based upon case count we might be sitting, but that we do make clear to them that based on state numbers, this is where the state's hard line is. So I don't really have an answer in there, but I think keeping something beyond just the state's one number would be useful.
I can't believe I'm saying this, but I feel like we should probably go with the state numbers. I feel like we are just fighting a losing battle that is just wasting everybody's time, effort, and energy and confuses our community. It's clear that we do not have support from our state leaders to do what we believe is best and safe for our community. I think in addition with these bills that I know haven't been voted on but are pending that punish people for being in a hybrid, I think the writing is on the wall, and I just feel like, I don't know what we're resisting, to be quite honest. So I would just make it easy for everybody and just that's what it is.
Good. I hear all of you. I think our reality is we need to make sure it's clear when individuals from the community go to our website, they can understand why we are in what we are in, and that decision has been removed from us. And so, they've made that very clear. I think the thing that I have really appreciated about our metrics is the fact that we have the green, yellow, orange, and red. It does give you a community risk indication. And I think, I don't know if it was Alan or Sabrina, I'm sorry, I don't know which one of you said this, but I do appreciate that it gives our community an indication of, oh, wait, yes, we are in school, but this is, maybe I need to be even tighter, whatever that looks like for individual families. So I like that color there. To give our community an indication, but I am with Monique that all of us have said that decision has been removed from us.
The part that I wonder about is the bottom part, the bottom where it says that staff absence of 10% or greater and a positivity of 15% or greater. At one point, the governor or the Department of Ed was still giving schools authorization to go remote if they had just the staff absence piece. Is there a way to not have the end, just have like, if we have, because the one, hopefully we won't get to 15%. I'm hopeful that, like someone said, maybe we are turning the corner. But the part that worries me is the staff absence.
The just to clarify, that's not the and is not our that's not from our perspective. That's specifically what the state says. So according to the state, and this has been tracking with what they have been approving and have not been approving, is that you have to have a student or staff absence of 10% or greater and the positivity of 15% or greater. Or if you just have a positivity of 20% or greater, then you can apply, then they would grant remote. I don't know. I mean, we could always apply. I don't know if we had, let's say we had a staff absence percent of 15%, I would just be, or 12%, but our positivity was where we were now. I don't know that we would be approved. We can always apply. I just don't know that we would be approved because we wouldn't meet both of the requirements.
Well, we did have a building that had 15% absence, and we were able to still keep the building open, right? So I think it's one of those things is for us to know like what that percentage is, because 15 seems pretty high, but if the building was still operable, I think that part is very tricky for me. I don't want us to be boxed when we could just, if we need it, we can apply and possibly, instead of waiting for all of these pieces, if we have 20% absence, because middle school and high school could be different. Maybe at 10% they can't operate, right? It's different scenario than elementary and high school or middle school. So I don't want to box us in this piece when there is the potential that we do get approved for having a great rate of staff absence.
I believe, and correct me if I'm wrong, but I think, didn't the state give more clarification on that since then and kind of tighten that up a little bit?
I actually searched everywhere this weekend for that because I thought the same thing, Gina, and I did not find anything. Because I remember what Jeanette says back in November, they were a little more lenient on that and piece because they understood that staffing was an issue. But they may have changed since then and really stuck to this. I'm not watching it like Kathy is.
The new bill that I believe it was the 1160 or 160, whatever it was, did indicate they finally added staff absence into the state metrics that was not previously there in November. The metrics were only student absence. You could apply, again, we could apply today if we just felt like it. There's nothing that stops you from doing that, but it's really more what would, what they'll approve. I don't know, but yeah, and again, that the state metrics are just per their definitions. It's not anything that we could choose to apply at any time. That's just what the definition is per their metrics.
Kathy, this is per, can be per school, right? It's not per district for you to request remote, right? And then remind me what there's something it says in there about having a conversation if you need to quarantine a class. So, I mean, that's a possibility too, right? But you need to get approval through the Department of, no? Okay.
You don't need to, if we needed to quarantine a classroom, we do not need approval. I believe the definition still is if we wanted to quarantine a school or shut down a school. But if we had a singular classroom, that still is under our ability. If we wanted, or a grade level for some reason, we could do that.
So I'm going to give my 2 cents, which is going to be even less clear than everyone else if everyone else was clear. But I agree that the choice has been taken away from us. But I kind of like what Alan was saying, if I understood him correctly, is that it would be nice if we could still have on our website the 14-day case per day rate, 100,000 rate, because that's a little more consistent rate. And it might help describe some decisions if people think we're in school when we have a high why can't I think of the words? I'm looking here and I'm blind.
Positivity.
A high positivity rate. So, I mean, is it possible? Does it take much time to track both those numbers?
No, the tracking isn't necessarily a problem. It's just the making sure that we're clear and that, like I said, currently our dashboard shows when we move to hybrid or not, based on those. I think that perhaps that section we would need to just change, just because, again, if we go into, let's say our case count went up a little bit and we were into orange, technically our current metrics, even if we were in the green, would say, well, that moves us to yellow, which means we're hybrid. And so I guess that's the part I'm just concerned about, making sure that we're clear for the community. It's not, I have no problem tracking and reporting case rate. It's more the decision after we have those numbers and what we present from that.
Well, in my opinion, you should remove hybrid since that's no longer an option. So you should remove the yellow and orange because we couldn't even do that if we wanted to. So you should just have the green and the red, right? That's my opinion.
Dr. Arnold, would the staff absence rate still be reported with the color banding? Okay, because I think that's helpful, and we've seen, correct me if I'm wrong, but it seems like those two things have followed each other anyway. And so even if we had, like Alan was talking about, a high positivity rate, but a lower case rate, we would see typically our staff absences were still on the lower side as well. So I guess I would be fine with it either way. And I would actually totally leave it up to your judgment as to what you think is going to be the clearest, because I feel like it's hard until you get into the nitty gritty of it and you're actually trying to maneuver it and figure out how to communicate things. And you might realize like, it actually is no big deal to add that case rate number in. It's not going to confuse anything, or it might seem like it really is, making it unnecessarily complicated. So personally, I would be fine with it either way.
I agree with Sabrina there. I've been looking back through the historical data, and wow, it's crazy now with the new way they're counting. We'd have sometimes where they'd say we have like a 30% positivity, and we still would have said we'd be in school. So yeah, if you want to propose some things, Kathy, and present it. I personally, one recommendation I'd make is on the student, staff, and community percentages, as you have them there, maybe at each 5% do a color, like a green, yellow, orange, red at each 5%, because I'd go up to the 20 and then give some sort of visual indicator. As far as case counts, whatever you think is relevant there. And I can imagine that could even change for the next board meeting based on new guidance of how to think about that now that we're vaccinating people, because as we vaccinate, the positivity rate's going to go up. So it'll be interesting.
Well, pending advice from the federal government, I'll bring something back then to the next meeting. That's and we may make some interim changes to our dashboard, just again for sake of clarity for the community.
New federal guidelines might not change what we can do though, based off of what the state adopts and doesn't adopt.
Very true.
Any other questions for Dr. Arnold on this one? All right, COVID-19 expenditures, and Chris Stensland.
Good evening, board. Before I get into the new expenditure report, I just wanted to echo how lucky we are to have Kathy. We had a UAN CFO meeting on Friday, and I've had emails going back and forth ever since. And most of the school districts don't even know when they're going to get any doses, let alone have had their first clinic and vaccinated 100 people. Des Moines might be the exception. I think they had a big clinic for their staff this weekend, but most of the other schools are like, yeah, we don't know when we're getting anything. So we're very lucky. I had mentioned at the last meeting that with the additional stimulus funds that we received after the packages that was passed in at the end of December, that I'd revamp our report. So I have done that. I've laid out the three funding sources that we are receiving from the federal government on COVID relief. The main one is the Elementary Secondary Schools Emergency Relief Funds, or ESSER. So we've gotten ESSER 1 and ESSER 2. And then we have gotten another allocation from the Governor's Educational Emergency Relief Funds, or the GEERF funds. I'll talk about the GEER funds a little bit. That one is first. That one is strictly related to technology, and we are using it to fund the hotspots. We started the hotspots. You can see we had just a little bit of expenditures in September. So that was about when we got that contract. On an annual basis, that contract for those hotspots will be about $72,000. So this money will just about fund that, maybe be a little short, and then we'll move any additional cost of that to PEPL. So that money is spoken for the rest of the year. When we got news of the new ESSER 2 funds, I then moved all of the expenditures from the 0019 project code that we'd been tracking. So that's where you see that big bump in January, to the ESSER 1 funds, and basically used up all those funds. The state kind of, it's not really a mistake, but I think they thought those funds would be spent faster than the school districts have been spending them. And they actually advanced us those funds in March. And federal funds are not to be advanced to school districts. There's all sorts of cash management law on returning interest on those funds and so forth. And so I went ahead and got those wiped out and presented that to the state in January, and we're fine. Other school districts are actually having to return the unused funds at this point. And then the ESSER 2 funds, the uses are exactly the same. They're very broad, anything related to COVID. And then the last bullet point under this is anything of continuity of service. So really those funds could be used for just about anything, as long as it keeps schools, operating during the pandemic. A little bit of the expenditures we had made up until January went into ESSER 2, but really the majority of what happened in January, we have 3 staff members, plus we're paying for all of our classroom supervisor subs, all those subs and so forth that are required for the accommodations out of the ESSER funds. And so that's January's, what was paid out in January. Eric, if you can scroll down just a little bit. I have down there the remaining encumbrance for those 3 positions, the 2 new nurses and the COVID coordinator's position, encumbered for the rest of the year, which will leave about $1.4 million. It'll be a little less than that because I don't have encumbered subs for the rest of the year and those type of things, or any additional PPE that we might have to buy. But that should be fairly minimal. You'll notice that in ESSER 1 and the GEER funds, there were non-public funds that were part of those original allocations. The allocations from the federal government specifically said that the non-public schools would receive an allocation, and non-public school, any federal or state money that goes to non-publics, those have to flow through a public school district because of single audit requirements. So what happens is, let's say that in August, I believe most of that was hand sanitizer. the public schools or non-publics tell us what they want, we order it, have it delivered to them, and we pay the bill. There was some interesting things that happened at the Federal Department of Education on how those funds would be allocated to the non-publics and whether they were maybe getting a disproportionate share of it. And so in the ESSER 2, the legislation took that part of the equation out and appropriated separate money for the non-publics. That's the state of Iowa is going to do in the form of grants, and they'll have to apply for it. When they do receive those grants, those funds will have to come through us. But at this point, I don't know what those are going to be. So that tells you about where we are on the federal funds. If you have any questions, I'd be happy to answer them.
Chris, until when do we have to use this money?
Well, obviously ESSER 1 is over, but that originally was until June of 21. I'm sorry, June of 21, because we received it in March of 20. The GEAR funds are June of 21, which we will have those expended, and the ESSER 2 are June of 23.
Do you foresee the need for us to be using this money for the enrollment shortage that we have?
So, you know, we've talked about that a little bit, and I think it will depend on if there is another round of stimulus. There is money for public schools in the COVID relief. I forget what they're calling it. The Rescue America plan, I think, is what the new plan is that they're debating right now. We might want to think about that if we get another round, and Superintendent Reisner can certainly chime in here as well. What it does, though, is it kicks the can down the road. So if we were use that for the enrollment shortage and the students did not come back, it kicks those cuts a year down the line when the costs are more, because your salaries and benefits have gone up. If you use it and the enrollment comes back, that's a good thing. Then you've used it for the stopgap. So it's kind of like looking into a crystal ball to see what's going to happen. I think, I believe there's going to be use for this money as far as remediation of learning. We also want to continue with we don't think the pandemic is necessarily going to be completely over before next school year. So we'd like to keep those additional nursing positions. So we want to use it for that. But until we know how much and if we're going to get more, I think we haven't. Superintendent Reiser, if you want to weigh in, I don't know that we've had a strong conversation about that.
Yeah, we've talked about it and thought through. I think until we see what some of what's going to go on at the state level in the next month or so, that we'll know more. And so for us, it's a little too early to. We know we ballparked where we think we'll be in terms of loss, but until we know, where we're at with SSA and where we're at with some other items, it's hard to determine that. We also really want to stay heavily committed to that gap, that learning loss and the gap that is, of course, widened, I'm sure, and so how we approach that in using this money strategically, because they did give it to us through 23. And the important part about that is really because if you look at research around learning loss and how you do a recovery, it takes a long time. And so we want to make sure we build that plan really strategically to maximize the money. So they're not a great answer, but I just think we're super early on this discussion, but it's a really good one to have. So I appreciate the board being mindful of it.
We don't know if we're getting a third round.
Yeah.
And then not unsurprisingly, the Senate and House both came out with different versions of funding last week.
Which we anticipated. They're going to have
to hammer that out. So once we know that, then we'll know a little bit better where we are.
Thank you.
One thing that came up that I'd maybe take an opportunity to ask the board about, and then maybe it could go to a committee like facilities or something. I think this idea we have of having hotspots available for students that might not normally have access to internet could be something that we start thinking about, whether we want to have that use of Pebble funds even going forward past the pandemic, because I think that's proven how allowing all of our students to have access to internet for homework and for research is important. But I just kind of ask the board members here, if that's something you think might be useful. We don't need to go into detail here, but maybe we could take that up in facilities to have a director of technology and Chris and everybody kind of give us some details on how that's been used and whether we might want to consider that going forward.
And we had a good number of hotspots available before the pandemic for families to check out or to use. It's just that when we went to the remote learning and the hybrid, the demand for them was a lot greater. And that's why when we expanded the use, when we got the gear funds. Actually, we were expanding that use before we got the gear funds. The gear funds just helped us pay for it.
Yeah, thank you for saying that, Alan, because when I heard hotspots, I thought of that too. And I thought, if we could get, how many do we have? How many does the district have?
Do you have that handy, Chris?
I don't think Steven's on, but I believe the contract was for 300. Does that sound right?
I think we upped it. I'm thinking it's closer to 400. But
yeah, I think we got another 100 after we went through those and then got another 100. And I think originally we had 75 that we just had on hand throughout the district. Something close to that.
So the demand did skyrocket.
Mm-hmm.
So maybe that's something we could talk about in a facilities meeting some point soon, Superintendent Reisner, just as we're starting to look towards next year and Pebble. And then we could bring that back to everybody, Director Colton and everybody, about
Absolutely.
what a recommendation might be. Because, I mean, yeah, we probably allocated more this year than we absolutely need. But getting some information on how they've been used and what number might be appropriate, it just seems like going forward, we're not going to have students use less online learning and less laptops. So if we can help support that, that'd be a great thing, I think.
I agree, definitely. So Jerry, I think, is on here. So Jerry, we'll put that on the facilities committee meeting. And then also might be a good idea to invite Christy to that as well, so that we can just have that, in terms of looking at it from a curriculum standpoint too. All right. Any other questions? Okay. We can move on to the learning model enrollment updates.
Good evening. I was looking over some questions that have been asked over the last several board meetings, and I've changed the way that I'm presenting this information. So hopefully it's not more confusing. Hopefully it answers more of the questions that we tend to have when we're looking at enrollment in each of the models. So this is done by building. And you will see in kind of that peachy orange columns, it's the number of students that are currently on site and the percentage by building. And then in the gray columns, you're looking at the number of students that are currently in a remote campus and the percentage by building.
I appreciate being able to see the numbers and percentages by building. So thank you for putting it together.
You are welcome. If you would like the numbers that I have been sharing up until this one, in addition to this, I can add that to the next report. But I think this might be a little bit easier and answer more of the questions that I've been writing down over the last several meetings.
Just I don't need a specific answer, but how is the balance of class sizes for your face-to-face and your remote sections?
Yeah, in our remote sections at the elementary, we range anywhere from 16 to 32 right now. So you'll see quite a range, which is not what we're typically used to doing, but it keeps the continuity for students with their current teacher as families are making decisions within the learning models. We see about the same range in the buildings. I think our lowest on-site class it's either 15 or 16. It might be 16 now. And then our class size is high as 25. is our range right now on site at the elementary. Our secondary system, as you can imagine, varies by class and by period in a way that it's really hard to say. The range is so high. Some of our classes have very minimal students, and then some of them have a larger class size. But I know they've been working on balancing that.
Okay, thank you. I appreciate that, just because it was, as you look at the full face-to-face, I've just wondered how have those numbers been in those classes? So I appreciate you giving those ranges. That's helpful.
Sure.
Thanks.
You're welcome.
Director Mixdorf, I really like this. Thank you so much. But since you offer it, I will take you up on seeing the grade. I also like to see the by grade level numbers. That was very useful. Thank you.
Thanks.
Another thing that I really liked before too, but this is amazing, was just how much it changed.
Thank you.
Christy, if I had a handful of glitter, I'd throw it in the air.
I'll take it. Sorry it took me so long.
Thank you. Thank you. I appreciate it.
You're welcome.
I'm curious, have we had many families since we had to extend it with the bill that was passed? Have we had many families move or many students move, or have people stayed consistent from our date that we wanted them to decide by?
Yeah, we'll move another 106 students on site on the 15th. 38 or 39 at the high school, 38. High school had 38 or 39, middle school had 38 or 39. I can't remember which had which. And then 29 students there amongst the preschool, pre-K 5. So 106. A little higher than I was anticipating, although I don't know why I keep trying to anticipate things this year.
We all do, and it just doesn't work. So thanks.
You're welcome.
I think I know the answer to this, but just so I understand this data correct, Christy, I think we have some at the elementary level where there are teachers that are teaching kids from multiple schools.
In remote campus, yes.
In remote campus. Those kids, though, on these lines aren't based upon the school the teacher's at, they're based upon the school the child would be attending, correct?
Yes.
Okay.
Yes. And I don't know if this is a clear picture, but you'll notice that like at Fellows, you'll see we have 64% of our students are on site, but 35% of them are in remote campus. We have the highest number of staff at Fellows serving our remote campus, because at the elementary, they have the highest percentage of students that are receiving remote learning. So they've stayed somewhat consistent throughout, which has helped from a staffing standpoint.
Director Mixdorf, I know that we've heard a couple of different times concerns from parents about remote teachers getting pulled back to the classroom. Do you anticipate, obviously I know you cannot anticipate what's going to happen in April. We have no idea when we have that last change period. From where we're at currently, will there be any changes to teachers next Monday?
We have one specific section right now that has 26 students that we're looking at, and Superintendent Reisner and I and the team have a meeting tomorrow that we'll look and try to problem solve that situation that can be hopefully as least disruptive to our students as possible. But it's a tough decision. We want to make sure we've got the layers in place that we need to, and almost look at it situation by situation, as opposed to here's how we do it when we get into this. There's transportation, there's numbers, there's enrollment in remote campus and on site. Mm-hmm. So we'll have that conversation tomorrow and be able to give an update at the next board meeting.
Thank you.
You're welcome.
Any other questions for Director Mixdorf? All right, that is the last item on our COVID-19 update. So we will move into our discussion items. And our first is our board committee update. So are there committees that would like to provide an update? I'm trying to look here. I think, is policy the only one that has met?
I think that is correct.
Okay.
Policy might be the only one that's met.
Okay. Well, policy did meet on January 27th, and I am working on the minutes still. We have another meeting scheduled for February 11th, and given that all our policies, everything we discussed in the policy meeting will be up for discussion, I'm not going to go through any of that right now.
What about the public comments, Sabrina?
Yeah, I was just going to say, is anything else from board committees?
For COVID? For the COVID-19?
Oh my gosh. Okay. Thank you. Yes, I completely forgot about that because thank you. I was thinking about that being on our agenda. It was the next item on the agenda was the public comments, but let's see here.
Sabrina,
Yes.
before we go back to that, I think just for you and the update, I think it would be helpful to announce that there's a membership change on the policy committee.
Oh, thank you. Yes. Director Franzen will be replacing Director Lenkaitis on the policy committee just to even out the committee responsibilities a little bit. So thank you for that, Director Bankin. Because I did forget to ask for public comments after the COVID-19 update. Are there any members of the public that would like to provide a comment on the COVID-19 update? And we will still have our regular public forum, but if you have anything specific to the COVID-19 update, you may raise your hand and I will read our statement on public comments. Eric, if you can pull that up for me. Residents of the district, students attending the district, parents or guardians of students attending the district, and district staff members may address the board about any topic relevant to the district, whether on the current agenda or not. Those who wish to speak must sign up at the beginning of the meeting. Speaker participation is limited to 3 minutes once per item. The views and opinions of citizens addressing the board do not necessarily reflect those of the board, district administration, or staff. Speakers are to remember that Iowa law prohibits the board from discussing specific employees, students, or their performance. Student speakers will state their name and school. Others will state their name and address. And I do not see any hands raised. So we will go ahead and move on to our next discussion item, which is the public comments at board meetings. And Superintendent Reisner, I will let you give your thoughts on this.
Sure. Thanks for allowing me the opportunity to put this on here just so we could have a discussion. I just was wanting to maybe propose that we look at the way that we're doing public comments after each discussion item. And the reason for that is I think it's really gotten confusing to the public, and confusing to us at times. It becomes kind of choppy. And so my proposal would be to return to just kind of a traditional board meeting where you have one public comment section. And really the reason for that is because as you go through each item, people can still comment on all of the items during the public forum section. So they could still have their 3 minutes per item, but it's in one section as opposed to under each discussion item. I really believe strongly in the board meeting is a meeting of the board in public. And we have other forums and avenues for people to give us feedback. But we need to, I believe we need to return to kind of a meeting of the board in public. It's really a business meeting to get business done, and meetings that last 4 or 5 plus hours, staff works all day, and those are really time consuming meetings when I feel like really it's a business meeting. We have committees, we have public forums. We have other ways that we can really engage community. And if that's the purpose for it, we can do some things through thought exchange and other avenues. But I really would think that having that public forum, because of where it's situated, we still would be allowing the public to speak on any of the items. It would just be in one section versus, and it does usually improve efficiency.
How would it reduce meeting length?
Because usually when somebody speaks, I'm speaking from experience only. So Director Beerbaum, just my experience with other boards, when you have one public forum, people, if they have items that they're going to speak to, they usually condense it. They don't speak 3 minutes on each item. And you just have a more condensed, they'll speak, if they want to speak about multiple items, they usually don't use 3 minutes for each item. They give their point and move to their next item.
There is a reason the format is like this. I'm trying to remember it. It feels like we set this up literally 1,000 years ago. Because when I started on the board, it used to be just that one public comment section in the middle. There's a reason that we moved it to be like this. Does anyone remember what it was?
Well, when I came and we did our very, very first kind of little training thing with Harry from IASB, Harry and Saban both talked about this, and to the best of my ability to remember, it was really along the lines of wanting to allow the public to have an opportunity to provide comment after every discussion item.
No, that's not it. There was a specific reason that this board made the decision. I'm not saying it's still valid and we should keep it. I would just like to, if there's a historian who remembers, I'd like to know. What I recall, and again, I might be wrong, is I recall there was a change from the way it used to happen to this, what we have now, because there was, I believe, people in the community who had particular expertise on particular items that we were working on, and we wanted to have them have an opportunity to come and speak without having to wait hours and hours for the public forum. I could be wrong about that. Does anybody else remember?
I don't know that I remember it as that, Director Benkin. I think that you are correct that because I know that when I started on the board, it was a public forum and that was it. How I recall it was that we were moving through a time period when the public wanted to ensure they had a voice, absolutely. And but I cannot remember why the decision specifically, if there were specific reasons given for why we need it after each discussion item compared to just the public forum. I think to Superintendent's point that yes, it does, Superintendent Reisner's point, it does provide the opportunity for public members of the public to comment on, I mean, essentially someone could comment on every single item. So it would take their 3-minute period, could make it 12 minutes or 15, depending on how many times. I haven't seen that happen too much from what I recall, but from what I recall from that time, 4 years or 5 years ago, was that it was, there was a desire from all of us, I think, to provide more of an opportunity, but some of the education that also took place with that at that point was making sure the public understood that this was not going to be a dialogue. The structure of it stayed the same. The members of the public could come, they could speak, or they could ask questions. But again, there was still no dialogue with the board, regardless of if they said something during a discussion item or if they said it during the public forum.
All right, well, thanks for that, Elisa. I don't have a particular preference one way or the other. I think what I appreciate is the flexibility, right? I appreciate that I find that the board is kind of responsive to the community and the needs. I certainly know people don't have trouble reaching us, right? But I also know that, being on these meetings, 5 hours, 6 hours, whatever it is, multiple times a week is draining for me. And I'm not on the staff that has to be working, and so perhaps even if it's just trying something new until things get back to normal, if anything because I think we're constantly asking, what can we do to help? If this is something that would help, I'm willing to try something and then address it at another time if that makes more sense.
If we were to change this, one recommendation I might have, or question, I guess maybe, I know that staff in the past have made a comment, and we've seen this as well, that if you have a public comment after the discussion has happened, then if someone in the public makes a comment that's inaccurate, the staff don't have a way to respond or correct it. And that's because, although Shaban said and IASB has said, we can continue a discussion after the public forum, we just tend not to do that the way like city council and other boards do. So my question is, if we wanted to have a single public forum, what if we had it at the beginning of the meeting, before the discussion? Because then at least we could, if the public comes with a comment, comes with some feedback, we do have the opportunity to discuss that with staff.
A challenge, I would say that a challenge I see in that, Alan, is that if there's any misinformation out there, it does not provide our staff an opportunity to first make sure the correct information is out there before then community members have the opportunity to speak.
I
That's
agree.
one challenge of that.
Agreed. That's why personally I like the way city council does it, where you have the discussion, then you have the public forum comments, and then the discussion continues, not responding and talking to the public, but you can talk amongst yourselves. And Shaban did say that that's something we can do. We don't. So legally we can do it. We just don't normally do it. I don't know. My biggest hesitation with a change like this is it means if we have an hour or so of discussion and then the public comments, by the time the public's commenting, it's so far past when the staff talked about something that it's a little disjoint, but also we're done with the discussion. Like there's no further discussion about it for 2 weeks. So I don't know.
I guess, well, what I would say I don't see us going back to it the way that we're doing it now either, though. That, we give all of the COVID-19 items, or do we? Maybe I'm just not. I don't feel like we have discussions after the public comments on discussion items either.
No, we haven't done that. I mean, it's just a practice we've never done. Yeah.
To Alan's point, though, I just want to throw out in terms of timing, if we did decide to go back, so it's not a new thing, it's actually just kind of reverting back to what we used to do of just having this one main time. Alan is saying maybe put it at the front. Elise is saying it actually makes more sense to come after people have had opportunity to get the information. I would just shy away from putting it at the end. I think that's where it used to be. And because the meetings were going so long, people they couldn't stay. And so people were actually losing out on their opportunity to provide or participate in public comment because the meetings were so long and discussion didn't come to the end. So if we did revert back to just one time, I would prefer it to be kind of in the middle. I guess it was maybe that's before action items. I can't remember where it used to be, but I think if we did revert back, that would make more sense.
My recollection is when we just had a public forum, that the point of the public forum has never changed. It's just that we added the discussion items we added the opportunity for public comment following each of the discussion items. So what I'm hearing Superintendent Reisner say tonight is, let's not have those opportunities for public comment after discussion items. She's suggesting just having the public forum. And I think where it is right now, is that what you're saying, Superintendent Reisner? So following the discussion items, but before consent items and action items.
Yeah, and that is what I was saying. And the reason for that is because then we're not taking away an opportunity for the discussion items for a comment to come in the discussion items or from the discussion items. They would still be able to comment on each discussion item after whatever report is given, or so that was my thinking in terms of that.
Yeah, it seems to me that the placement of it currently on the agenda is good because it's after the discussion items. So after staff has been able to give information and also before action items. So if people have a desire to have their voice heard before we vote on something, they can still do that before those votes happen. So I'm in favor of the change. I had a couple of emails during the last meeting of people who were super confused as to where we were at on the agenda because they thought we were in public forum and, you know, they didn't know, they're trying to hang on to hear something and couldn't figure out where we were. I think with the Zoom format, people come in and out a lot more than what we would have if we were in an in-person meeting. And so especially as we're doing the virtual meetings, it might make more sense to have that streamlined agenda so people can follow where we're at.
I think the way that I see it, I think I'm not seeing it how everyone else is seeing it. I think to me, it feels that because it's targeted, it's more efficient. So if it's only COVID and some people just watch that portion of COVID and they have a comment and that's it, and they can go on with their day. And then we, as a board, we're prepared to receive comments just for COVID. So I think it is more efficient in that sense because then the public forum, it's in a way, I think we're moving them around. We'll either have it at the public forum or the public comment. So I think as it is efficient. We also don't have a policy that restrict people to only 3 minutes per board item unless we do, and I'm not aware of it. So if someone wants to speak 3 times, there's nobody saying, there's no reason they can't.
The policy is listed, and you're correct, Jemette. It says, sorry, Director Colton.
No.
It says, it says you may have, I don't know the exact wording off the top of my head, but you can comment on any item, and I believe it's up to 3 minutes for each item.
That's correct. 3 minutes once per item. So they could speak during the public forum for 3 minutes each on 3 different items.
Right. That's what I meant. Okay. That's what I meant. So we don't, okay. That's exactly what I meant. So there's that. So it's in our policy. So I don't know. I don't see any benefit from taking it away. If anything, I think we've been drumming this drum about communication and being available to the public. And I think this is a piece for people. And actually, sometimes people have great points after a discussion that I'm like, why didn't I think of that? And I think those are good takeaways.
I want to be really clear. I am not saying I don't want to hear the public or hear the public's points. That's not it at all. All I was doing is trying to make the meeting more efficient. And so that I'm please hear me when I say this isn't me trying to restrict the public from having comment. It's just, I also have to be really mindful that 5-hour board meetings we can't have 5-hour board meetings. I received community feedback from that. There were people that felt like we were trying to not be, what was the wording? We were stalling, things like that. And so, people want to hear the board meeting, but they're not going to sit for 5 or 6 hours each time. And so I'm trying, and it's also not really the venue. A board meeting is a meeting of the board. It's a business meeting in the public. And so as much as we can continue to operate with, that is the purpose of a board meeting. I mean, that is what it's about. And I want to hear community comment. I'm just really trying to look for what's that balance so that we can try and keep it within a reasonable time frame. Because sometimes by the end of the meeting, we really do have important things to talk about, and people, they feel tired and they feel rushed and they don't want to stay. And some of those things at the end of the meeting are just as important for my staff as they are as the things that are early on. And so, I get the pacing of it is long. Either we're going to have to figure out how we last that long or have more than 2 board meetings a month.
But I think with that, I think it's actually really good feedback because maybe that's to us that maybe if there's a meaty subject on the agenda, maybe we move it to the top, right? So that's one thing we can do. We also need to consider that last board meeting was an exceptional board meeting. There were a lot of things on the agenda and there were lots of like heated argument. And we did have a public forum that was longer. So I don't want us to react to something just because we had this outlier that perhaps doesn't feel like an outlier. But to me, that long public forum did feel like that. So that's the only reason why I'm kind of iffy about this, because I don't want us to react to something to change just because it happened to be a very, very long meeting.
I agree with that. I think, Jeanette, in that I don't think this change would have made the 5-hour board meeting we had not be a 5-hour board meeting. I mean, if we're saying that by changing the public forum, we're going to get a shorter board meeting, that either means we're saying by changing the public forum, we're going to have all of us have less discussion, or we're going to take less public feedback.
That's not,
well, I mean,
that's not what I'm saying. I'm saying my experience has been that when you have one public forum, people condense what they're saying so they can cover multiple topics in a time period. And so yes, you do, you have a shorter clip of time because people are condensing what they're saying, but I'm good to leave it the way it is. I mean, totally fine with that too. My goal is just to try to get us into really not having as long of board meetings, but we can also work on, I think there's some other things we can do by having some work sessions versus loading the agenda with heavy topics like Director Colton was saying. If we know there needs to be something else, we can do that.
I'll just interject. I want to say that I feel like for this board, it feels like we get into this either or category. I have experienced the board meetings differently than Director Colton. I feel like the past 25 have been 5-6 hour board meetings. they all have felt like we've had a lot of really long ones, which is fine. That's what we all signed up for, and I get it. But I feel like that's not what the staff signed up for. And so if there's a way to make this easier on the staff, that's fine. And I agree with Director Beerbaum in some ways. It's like, will this really be helpful? Will this won't? The thing that I think is missing is that, again, the board, not this board, but the board before, because this issue comes up all the time. We said as a board that board leadership, this might have been, I'm trying to remember when this was, but that board leadership was going to be hosting many more public forums, so that the community could come, communicate with and hear from the board directly about specific issues, so that they wouldn't be coming to the board meetings because they would have other opportunities to have just a really pointed, focused community conversation around an issue. And I think we might have done one around the high school and never did any again. And so I don't want, again, the staff to say, well, we're just going to pick up more obligation and we'll do more work sessions and whatever. But maybe, again, it's time for the board to revisit the way in which we, communicate with the community. I know several people ran on communication, right? If this is another way to engage our community, this might get us to that efficiency that benefits everybody.
Well, and that's a thought that I had as well. And I think that we've talked about this previously, that if we have a topic that we know is going to have a lot of public input, that might be a good opportunity to have a special meeting or public forum or something like that that's just devoted to that topic. And that way, you don't have to have all of the staff present. It can be, we're going to have some discussion on this topic and hear from the community on this topic. And it doesn't have to be taking that couple of hours, what could have been a 2-hour meeting, but putting it into a regular board meeting that then would turn into a 4 or 5 hour board meeting. So I hear that too. And that it doesn't have to be that we either keep what we have or we just do the public forum, that there might be other ways to address this issue.
I don't really have an opinion either way. I just have a quick question. So if someone is speaking on more than one topic and they get 3 minutes per topic, how is that timed? Is that clunky? I'm just curious how that works.
Well, currently, I think it's not been an issue with having the different discussions, because we did have, I think, at least 2 people that spoke, definitely maybe 2 or 3 that spoke on multiple topics last time, but because it's after the discussion item, they got 3 minutes under the COVID update, and they got 3 minutes under the information item on the Black Lives Matter at school, and then they got 3 minutes in the public forum. So I think that actually would become more clunky as I think about how to navigate that in a public forum, where we'd almost have to ask them to say what topic they're speaking on, or I think it would be hard to navigate because they would kind of tend to just jump from one thing to the next.
The reason why I would be interested in moving it all to the public forum is just because it would be less confusing. I think it's kind of, especially that last meeting, we had so many people talking after the one discussion item that everybody was kind of confused when we went back to the agenda to figure out where we were at. So, because it wasn't part of the public forum, it was part of a discussion item for public feedback. So I would be in favor of it, just to eliminate some of that confusion, as long as people still get a chance to talk.
And I would just remind you, as the directors, this is your meeting. This is your meeting. This isn't the public's meeting. This is your meeting to do business of the board in the public. So I really encourage you to think that way, so that we can be efficient and get business done, and then maybe have, like you were saying, board community forums, because I think that's a really great point. The board wants that communication and to hear from public and to interact. And so I think there's probably a much better venue for that than setting a timer, and having it have to fall under one of these things. And there's people that never will speak during these because it's really hard for them but they would in a community forum. So I love that idea.
I would support that. I agree with Director Binkin that we have talked about that in the past, and we kind of fell off that for a variety of reasons. I mean, I know we did the listen and learn, staff did, but that really committed staff, and it didn't allow the board, us as a board, to have a discussion with the community about our thoughts on things. I think we need the board equivalent of that. As far as what Director Colton had said, I agree that this does feel a bit reactive right now, simply because we've had some long meetings. That said, I don't anticipate we're going to have another global pandemic next year, leading to meetings every week that are multiple hours long. But if there are some things we could do, one suggestion I would have is, last meeting we just had too many meaty topics. If we see that coming, we need to split those up, because by the end of the meeting, and where we have public forum on, it's not going to change the number, because the same 3 people that commented multiple times on multiple topics would still take the same amount of time. It would still have been a 5-hour board meeting. But maybe if we would have had some community engagement ahead of time about a couple of the topics, then some of the things would have been addressed there, and maybe one of the topics could have been easily split to a work session, right? The mental health topic could have been its own work session. But I do agree we need to take some actions to try to improve this. Those are the 2 I would suggest. As far as whether to move public forum or not, I'm ambivalent to that a little bit. I think those other 2 ideas of having some work sessions for some meaty topics and trying to have, as Director Binkin said, some community board engagement methods are probably going to help more than anything on the core issues. So.
Yeah, I would agree with that. I'm in favor of, leaving it and then trying some alternative strategies, because I think Director Beerbaum and Director Binkin, you're both correct that I think those would have a much bigger impact on the length of the meetings. All right. Would anyone object to just keeping them the way they are for now and looking at some other strategies?
Sounds like a plan.
Okay.
Works for me.
To me, it sounds like a plan to me. I'm speaking for the whole board.
Sounds like a great plan, because I think we just made it so Director Linkaitis and Director Shields Cook are going to take on most of the work. So
Thanks so much.
That's why I've been silent. I figured that out a while ago.
What was the decision?
So we'll keep it the way that it is, but we will work on implementing some other strategies to reduce the length of the meetings. Okay, policies for discussion. And there are 2 on here. The first one is 401.6, limitations to employment references. And I will ask Kristen Johnson to give a real quick update on this for us.
Hi, thank you. This is a policy that basically just puts into the board policy a very good recommended policy in terms of, it comes from a history of school districts not being forthcoming with information about former employees that are terminated for reasons that you don't want that teacher to continue teaching at another school. And so all this policy does is just say that we're not going to give positive performance, or references for employees who are let go from the district under certain circumstances.
Any questions from the board on that policy?
I guess.
I'm going to say thank you for bringing it forward. I cannot remember the situation I'm thinking about, but I appreciate that this is coming forward as a policy. So thanks.
One question I have is, Kristen, the way you explained it seems a little bit different than the policy. Because the way you explained it is we would not give a good reference. The way the policy said is we would not assist someone in trying to find a job.
Yes. I guess I'm not sure. I think giving a good reference does assist in someone trying to find a job. But yes, it could be broader than that. So definitely we wouldn't be writing letters, whatever kind of thing that somebody would request to help them get a job. Yes, this would prevent them from doing that.
Any other questions on this one? Okay, 503.4, good conduct rule. And Kristen, are you speaking on this one as well, or is this Dr. Hawkins?
Dr. Hawkins.
I'm happy to take this one. This is really the same policy on good conduct that we currently have, with 2 notable additions. Our current policy lists that the good conduct rule applies to any student involved in an extracurricular activity. This policy adds the language of competitive clubs and co-curricular activities. So it's being a little bit more explicit about the policy applying to students in those groups. Other than that, it's word for word the same as our previous policy, with a little improvement.
Questions from the board on this one?
I don't necessarily have a question on the policy itself, just a quick question of how the policies are being presented. So they used to be presented with the draft, and the old policy, it had scratched. Are we not doing that anymore?
No, the policy committee decided that we wanted to see the final policy and then hear from the staff what the changes were, because there was just a lot of confusion of which one we were supposed to be looking at and what represented the changes. And it just seemed to be clearer to have the final policy and then just have them give a brief explanation of what was different about it.
Thank you. That was helpful, because I looked at this and I thought, I've seen this before. So thank you, Dr. Hawkins, for pointing those pieces out. Thanks.
Yeah, not a problem.
Any other comments on the policies for discussion? All right, we will move into our public forum. And for our members of the public, if you would like to speak, please raise your hand and we will give you permission to speak. And I'm trying to give good wait time, but I do not see any hands raised.
Scared them all away.
Okay, so I will go ahead and close our public forum and we will move on to our consent items.
I move to approve the consent agenda as presented.
Second.
Moved by Bankin, seconded by Perez. Discussion. Okay.
Are we?
I think I was just going to see if anyone, okay.
Will they?
Yeah, thank you.
Okay.
Got it.
From the district.
All right.
Gifts to the district.
Gifts to the district. North Grand Christian Church, Staples, Wilson Toyota of Ames, Colin Birds, and Ames Ford Lincoln.
Thank you. Okay, it has been moved by Bankin, seconded by Perez to accept the consent agenda as presented. All those in favor say aye.
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 Aye. Opposed, nay. Passes 7-0. And our action items. We first have our policies for action.
I move the board approve the policies as presented.
Second.
Okay. Moved by Perez, seconded by Linkaitis. Discussion.
So I noticed that I appreciate that we have the no corporal punishment policy. I'm surprised we still need it, but I know, isn't there a bill in the Iowa State House to bring that back? Anybody been monitoring that?
Kristen, do you have an update on that?
I did not see that one. I've been reading through all the bills as they're presented. I had not. I must have skipped over that one.
I haven't seen it either.
All right. Well, we'll just keep monitoring. Hopefully it's
Yeah.
You know.
I'm going to look for it tonight.
All right.
Thanks.
Anything else? All right, it's been moved by Perez, seconded by Linkaitis to approve the policies for action. All those in favor indicate by saying aye.
Aye.
Aye. Aye.
Opposed, nay. Passes 7-0. New Ames High School change orders.
I move the board approve the change orders for the New Ames High School project as presented.
Second.
Moved by Franzen, seconded by Beerbaum. Discussion. Okay. All those in favor indicate by saying aye.
Aye.
Aye. Opposed, nay. Passes 7-0. Items from the board.
I just have two quick items. I want to thank the district for their Black Lives Matter at School week. I know it was a really, really rough week, but I think it was really important for our students, all of our students, to be able to see themselves reflected in the curriculum. That's something we've heard repeatedly from our critical consciousness trainers and you know, understanding, and I think as well, understanding that there would be some in the community who there would be resistance. And so I want to thank the district because, you know, the easiest thing to do would have just been to say, forget this. and to leave those students and their families high and dry. And the fact that you didn't, that you stuck by them, that you really stood firm in the values of equity and valuing every family was, I think, really meaningful for our district and for our students. And so I just want to acknowledge that. The other thing I want to do is just to give the board a quick update. So I've been asked to serve on the IASB Equity Task Force. IASB is trying to figure out how they can help other boards advance their equity work. And I served on this. We had our first meeting, and it was school board members from all across the state. One of them was from Storm Lake, Iowa. And I was like, why does that sound familiar? It's like Steve King territory. And I was like, this is going to be a dumpster fire. But I was so impressed with every single person who was on the committee. There is so much fantastic work around equity happening all across the state. I left feeling inspired. And so what I wanted to share was that we are not alone. I think sometimes it feels very alone, but many districts are acknowledging that this is the work and that every single district has to do it. And they're all trying to do it right. And so I just wanted to share with you that there are other people who are looking to us, and there's other people whom we can look to, but just that really every district in the state is really doing this work. And I just wanted to share that.
Director Bankin, will you keep us posted on that work? Serving on the IASB Legal Services Fund, I never know if I try to keep people updated, but I would appreciate hearing about the work that other districts are doing. And I think it's great for our community to hear what the rest of Iowa is doing. So thank you for your time on that. And I echo your comments. It was a rough week because we had some feedback, but I would say it was not a rough week in terms of the learning that took place for our students. So many thanks to all of our staff for providing those opportunities for our students.
On that topic, I'll just give a shout out for Principal Michael and Assistant Principal Coronado at the Ames Middle School. The videos they made were unbelievable, awesome. I've recommended them to people across the community that aren't even students. I mean, I think they show what that week was really supposed to be about. And I'm going through them actually at home with all of my kids, all my age kids, because I think they're just a great way to present the information and put it in context. So if any of you haven't seen those videos middle school produced, and I'm not discounting anything anybody else produced, that was just the stuff that I was able to see. It's great. I highly recommend everybody see it.
Are those on the middle school site?
They're on the middle school Facebook page.
I can send them to the whole board tonight.
That would be great. Thank you.
Yeah, you bet.
Some of them were pushed out on Twitter, the school district Twitter page, which was great to have those out for the community to see. Thank you.
I would like echo my fellow board members, and I'm going to single out Dr. Director Jones for being the face of it all, so gracefully done. And every time I saw the interviews, every time I was like, my heart just was so proud of this Black man that was out there, and it was saying it so beautifully, so masterful, why we need this work. So thank you, Dr. Director Jones.
I think, I don't know about the rest of you, but it really offered itself for some great conversations with my kids. And that was wonderful to talk to them about what they learned and just get their perspectives on it. It was really great.
I agree with what everyone else had said. I'm so proud of the district for sticking to it, as Director Bankin said, in the face of some challenging feedback and pushback from people. Overwhelmingly, though, I heard so much positive feedback from parents and community members and students. Lots of students in the LGBT community who were just so happy to have conversation around their identities and sort of an increased understanding of intersectionality and how all of those things fit together. So it was a wonderful opportunity. All right.
I don't want to be silent on it and be the only board member who didn't say kudos to the district. I was really found the letters that we received from some parents who took the time to let us know about their kids' learning experience. I found them incredibly heartwarming and touching, and at times even emotional. So thank you for sharing your experiences with us. It was heartwarming. And I kudos for the district for taking this on.
All right. Items from the superintendent.
Well, it's been said tonight already, but I just wanted to point out the work of Dr. Arnold in getting our staff's vaccinations up and going. And I know it doesn't seem like that big of a mission, but it really is. So the advocacy she has had to really stick with has been like no other. I mean, she has been relentless in her advocacy for getting our staff vaccinated and then putting a schedule together that's just been fantastic. So I know it was already said earlier tonight, but I had put it on here. I didn't want to miss that opportunity. And then the other thing I wanted to just share with the board, we're looking for making plans on how we're going to debrief our BLM week last week. And so we're going to debrief as an admin team, and then our administrators are going to debrief with their staff. We've talked about several different ways. And I think we landed on kind of a more survey mechanism and using that with the community as well to gather some feedback from parents on how their week went. And then we have a year to perfect it, tweak and perfect and really make it even more amazing next year. So just wanted that to be out there that we do. We have plans to debrief. It's not, we're not letting that go without having a lot of deep thought around the feedback. So that is all I have.
Is it appropriate to ask a quick question now, or is that not, this is not the time to do that?
Is it on something I covered?
Just what you were just talking about right now.
I don't think you can because I didn't put it on the agenda.
Okay, good to know.
But I'm afraid to say that. It makes me.
Didn't we learn in our last work session with Drew that we can ask a question and get it answered? I remember I commented on it because we've been so careful.
I thought he said if it was on the agenda, though. For some reason, that's what stuck in my mind. So maybe it's okay, Chris. And where's our board secretary?
Can't or can?
So
Can. Oh,
I think you can ask a question of staff and get an answer. What you can't do is deliberate, which is discuss among the board.
That's what I recall, Chris.
So like having back and forth discussion with each other. Okay.
So Michelle, yes, your question, but then I can't jump in and discuss with you and Michelle what I think about her question.
Got it.
Well, now there's like all this pressure that this better be a really great question.
Good one.
There's all this deliberation about what we can and can't do.
I was just curious that you're gonna. Do you have any idea of how many other schools presented the same programming or curriculum? Okay,
I don't.
Okay,
Dr. Jones might. Let me check if he's on here. Dr. Jones, he is. Wait 1 second. Thank you, Monique. But Dr. Jones, are you on here?
Yes.
Thank you.
Question again?
Do you happen to know how many other districts did Black Lives Matter Week of student action?
Not in the state of Iowa. I wasn't aware of any other districts participating in it.
Now, no other board members say anything. Michelle, do you have any other questions?
no, I was just curious because because it was such a news item that I was surprised that it wasn't it just didn't make it sound like it was happening anywhere else. So either we're very ahead of our time, which we are, so.
It happened, Dr. Jones might still be on. It happened all over the country.
Did it? Okay.
Yes. And I could try, Monique put, I think there is a list, but I know I saw something somewhere. So let me look, let Dr. Jones and I look.
There is a list. Yeah, there is a list of different school districts across the nation that participated with the BLM at school. However, we didn't do, or at least on my end, I didn't do an official sign-in with the national BLM at school.
Oh. Thank you.
Yeah.
Any other questions for me?
All right, we will move on to the board planning calendar. And I think the only change on this is that we have added our retreat or work session on June 8th at 10 a.m. Our next regular meeting will be February 22nd at 6:30. Any comments, questions on the calendar? All right, then I will entertain a motion to adjourn.
I move we adjourn.
Second.
Moved by Perez, seconded by Beerbaum. All those in favor say aye.
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 Opposed, nay. Passes 7-0. Have a good evening, everyone.
Bye.
You too.
Bye.